In the untamed heart of the American West, a powerful rancher's life hangs by a thread after a brutal assassination attempt. Shot from his horse and left for dead in a remote arroyo, his fate takes an unexpected turn when a widowed homesteader discovers him at dawn. Mistaking him for a simple drifter, she offers him shelter in her modest cabin, sharing what little she has to nurse him back to health. As he recovers, he uncovers a chilling truth. The men who tried to murder him are the same corrupt land barons threatening to steal her late husband's claim. What will happen when this wounded rancher rises from his sickbed, armed not just with strength restored, but with newfound purpose and unlikely allies among the territory's forgotten souls? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Clayton Reed stood at his office window, watching the morning sun paint the mountains gold. His weathered hands absently traced the edges of the deed to Golden Creek Ranch, 30 years of blood and sweat captured in a single sheet of paper. The document had yellowed with age, but the ink still held the power of everything he'd built. The leather chair behind his mahogany desk creaked as he settled into it, every sound echoing through the quiet grandeur of his ranch house. Photos lined the walls. His father's original homestead, the first cattle drive, the day he'd expanded into the north pasture. Each image marked a step in building what folks now called the finest spread in 3 territories. Mr. Reed, his foreman Tom Martinez, appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. Cattle counts finished for the north section. Numbers are good, better than last year. Clayton nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. The new irrigation system's paying off then. Yes, sir. Though Tom hesitated, shifting his weight. There's something else. Spotted some unfamiliar riders near the east boundary. 3rd time this week. Clayton's jaw tightened. He'd been expecting this. The Hollister brothers had been pushing boundaries lately, testing limits. Just last month they'd bought out the Walsh place under suspicious circumstances. Old man Walsh had sworn he'd never sell, then suddenly signed over his deed and disappeared east. Keep an eye on it, Clayton instructed, rising from his chair. And Tom, make sure everyone's carrying when they ride fence. The foreman nodded grimly and departed, leaving Clayton alone with his thoughts. He moved to the gun cabinet, running his fingers over the polished walnut stock of his father's Winchester. In 30 years of ranching, he'd never drawn first, but he'd never hesitated to draw last. A knock at the front door interrupted his reverie. Martha, his housekeeper of 20 years, appeared with a telegram. From the land office, sir. Clayton broke the seal, his expression darkening as he read. The Hollisters had filed a water rights claim on Spring Creek, his water source for the entire east pasture. They'd need a survey crew to settle it, scheduled for next week. He reached for his pocket watch, solid silver, his father's final gift. The face caught the morning light, reflecting the empire he'd built, an empire that now faced its greatest threat, though Clayton didn't yet know. How great! Martha, he called, decision made. Have Tom ready my horse. I'll be riding to town. He tucked the deed into his safe, spinning the dial with practiced fingers. And Martha, if I'm not back by sundown, she nodded, understanding in her eyes. They'd weathered storms before, this faithful woman who'd helped him build his dream. I'll send Tom looking, sir. God willing, it won't come to that. Clayton donned his hat and coat, checking his revolver before sliding it into its holster. The weight was familiar, comforting. Like his father always said, in the West, a man's only worth his word and his will to back it up. Outside, his stallion stomped impatiently, sensing his master's tension. Clayton mounted with the ease of long practice, despite his 55 years. The morning air carried the scent of sage and pine, the same smell that had drawn him here as a young man. Keep things running, Martha, he called down from the saddle. I've got business to settle. As he rode toward town, Clayton couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something bigger than water rights and boundary disputes. The land had taught him to read signs, in weather, in cattle, in men's hearts. Today, every sign pointed to trouble, but he'd built this empire from nothing, fought off rustlers and drought and recession. Whatever the Hollisters were planning, they'd learn what others had learned before them. Clayton Reed's empire wasn't built on luck or paper. It was built on grit and principle, and he'd die before he'd let it fall. His horses' hooves kicked up dust as they headed east, toward town and whatever waited there. The morning sun cast his shadow long across the trail, a silent reminder that every man's time must come. Clayton Reed just hoped he'd chosen his ground well for whatever battle lay ahead. The land office in town was unusually quiet when Clayton arrived. Judge Morrison's clerk, a nervous young man with ink-stained fingers, handed him a letter without meeting his eyes. "Came for you this morning, Mr. Reed. Judge says to tell you he's been called away sudden-like. Won't be back till next week." Clayton broke the seal, unfolding the paper carefully. The warning inside was clear enough: don't trust the survey crew. No signature, but he recognized the hand, Bill Thompson, an old friend at the county seat. Bill had never steered him wrong. "Tell the judge I'll return when he does," Clayton said, tucking the letter into his vest pocket. Outside, the street was empty, save for a few riders moving purposefully toward the saloon, faces he didn't recognize, their horses bearing unfamiliar brands. The sun had passed its peak when Clayton headed home, taking the long route through Shadow Canyon. The walls of red rock rose steep on either side, and the late afternoon light played tricks with the shadows. His horse's ears twitched forward, then back. The first warning. The shot came from above, echoing off the canyon walls. Clayton's horse reared, then staggered as a second bullet found its mark. He kicked free of the stirrups as the animal fell, rolling behind a boulder as more shots kicked up dust around him. "That's far enough, Reed!" The voice bounced between the canyon walls. "Time to settle accounts." Clayton drew his revolver, counting shadows among the rocks above. 3, maybe 4 shooters. The odds weren't good, but he'd faced worse. "Show yourselves, you cowards!" "Why rush things?" Another voice, closer now. "We've got all afternoon to make this look right and proper. Just a sad case of a rancher getting lost, falling victim to bandits. Happens all the time out here." A bullet chipped stone near his head. Clayton returned fire, satisfied by a cry of pain above. But the victory was short-lived. His horse lay still now, blood darkening the sandy soil. Without a mount, in open country, he was as good as dead. "The Hollisters send their regards," called the first voice. "Should have taken their offer, old man. Now they'll get your water rights anyway, and your widow's spread to boot." Clayton's blood ran cold. Martha. They'd go after the ranch next. He had to warn her, had to survive. But the shooters were moving, closing in from both sides. His gun held 5 shots. Not enough. The next bullet caught him high in the shoulder, spinning him against the rock. Pain exploded through his chest, but training took over. He fired twice more, forcing his attackers to cover. Then he ran, keeping low, zigzagging between boulders toward the deeper shadows of the arroyo. More shots followed, kicking up dust at his heels. Something hot tore through his leg, and the ground rushed up to meet him. He rolled with the fall, tumbling down the steep bank into the dry stream bed below. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Above, boots crunched on gravel. "Check him, make sure he's done." Clayton lay still, one hand pressed against the wound in his shoulder. Blood soaked his shirt, but the pain told him he was alive. For now. Rocks clattered down the slope as someone descended. Clayton waited, timing his breaths, his fingers finding a fist-sized stone in the sand. When the shooter's boots appeared, at the edge of his vision, he struck. The man went down hard, but Clayton's triumph was cut short by another bullet. This one took him in the side, and darkness crept at the edges of his vision. He heard more boots on the rocks. Voices arguing. Above, "He's finished. Let's get clear before someone comes looking." "What about—" "Leave him. Sun'll do our work for us. Mount up." Hoofbeats faded into the gathering dusk. Clayton tried to rise, but his body wouldn't obey. His father's pocket watch had fallen from his vest, its silver face spattered with blood. As consciousness slipped away, he watched the second hand tick steadily onward. marking time as the shadows lengthened and the desert cold began to settle in. Sarah Collins always walked the arroyo at dawn. John had taught her that, her late husband's voice still clear in memory. First lights when you spot what the nights brought in. Usually it was just strayed cattle or wind-scattered debris. This morning brought something else entirely. She saw the blood first, dark patches on pale sand, then the shape of a man, half hidden in shadow. Her hands tightened on her father's old Spencer carbine as she approached, ready for trouble. But the stranger didn't move, even when her boot scattered pebbles near his head. "Mister?" Her voice sounded thin in the morning quiet. No response. She knelt beside him, feeling for a pulse beneath his dirt-streaked collar. Faint, but steady. His clothes spoke of money, or they had, before the blood and dust. A silver pocket watch lay nearby, its face cracked but still ticking. "Hold on now," she murmured, setting aside her rifle to spread her shawl over him. "You're not dying in my arroyo." Getting him to her cabin nearly broke her back. She hitched her mule to a travois made from fence rails and John's old quilt, the one she'd kept stored away these 3 years since his passing. The stranger didn't stir during the slow journey, but his breathing held steady. Inside, she cut away his ruined shirt, working by lamplight. 3 bullet wounds, none immediately fatal, but infection would take him if she couldn't get them cleaned. She'd learned nursing during the war, watching her mother tend injured soldiers. Now those skills served again. "You're a lucky man," she told her unconscious patient as she worked. "Inch lower, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Not that they were having much of one yet, but talking helped steady her hands as she dug for the bullet in his shoulder. Hours passed. She cleaned the wounds with whiskey, stitched what needed stitching, and bound everything tight with strips torn from her spare sheets. The quilt she'd used for the travois, cleaned as best she could now, covered him on her narrow bed. She'd sleep in John's old chair tonight. Fever set in as evening approached. Sarah bathed his face with cool water, watching for signs of awareness. His features were strong, weathered by sun and years. Not young, but handsome still. In his delirium, he spoke of horses, water rights, and someone named Martha. "Easy now," she soothed when he tried to rise. "You're safe here." "The deed," he muttered, fingers plucking at the quilt. "Have to protect." "Shh." She pressed a cup of willow bark tea to his lips. "Drink this. Whatever's troubling you can wait." Through the night she kept vigil. The fever peaked near midnight, his skin burning under her touch. She changed the compresses, whispered prayers, and watched the stars wheel past her window. By first light his breathing had steadied, the fever breaking with the dawn. She was dozing in John's chair when he first opened his eyes. Clear eyes, alert but cautious, taking in his surroundings. Sarah straightened, keeping her movements slow and gentle. "Morning," she said softly. "You've had quite a time of it." He tried to speak, coughed, then managed a whispered, "Where?" "My cabin. Found you in the arroyo yesterday morning." She helped him sip water from a tin cup. "I'm Sarah Collins. You're safe here." He seemed to weigh her words, studying her face. Whatever he saw there appeared to satisfy him. "Thank you," he said finally. "I'm James Turner." The hesitation told her it was likely false, but she didn't press. Men with bullet holes often had reasons for caution. "Rest now, Mr. Turner. Questions can wait." He settled back against the pillows, exhaustion clearly winning over wariness. Sarah returned to her chair, taking up her mending. Outside, morning light painted the desert in shades of gold and rose. Another day beginning, different now because of the stranger in her bed. John's quilt covered him, its familiar pattern of blues and browns, a reminder of simpler times. She'd sewn it during their first year of marriage, when hope came easier. Now it served a new purpose, warming a wounded stranger who carried secrets like bullets beneath his skin. Sarah threaded her needle, settling in for another long day of watching and waiting. Whoever he truly was, whatever trouble had found him, those were questions for another time. For now, healing was enough. Days passed like molasses in winter. Clayton, now answering to James Turner, measured time by Sarah's routines. Dawn brought coffee and fresh bandages. Noon meant soup, usually bean with whatever vegetables her small garden offered. Evenings were quieter, marked by the soft scratch of her mending needle or the whisper of pages turning in her worn Bible. He learned her story in pieces, watching her work. The newspaper clipping he found while she was out tending her chickens told more. Local rancher John Collins, found dead in disputed canyon. The article was 3 years old, yellowed and creased from frequent folding. The details were sparse but familiar. Another accident that hadn't quite convinced the widow. "Your husband," he ventured one evening as she changed his dressings. "He worked this land long." Sarah's hands stilled briefly. 10 years. Built everything from scratch, including that garden you've been admiring through the window. Good land. Good enough to kill for, apparently. The bitterness in her voice was raw, honest. Though the sheriff called it a riding accident. Strange. Sort of accident that leaves boot prints around the body. Clayton kept his face neutral, though his gut churned. The pattern was clear now, the same one he'd seen with Old Man Walsh and others. The Hollisters' reach was longer than he'd suspected. "They tried to buy you out after?" She nodded, resuming her work on his bandages. "Hugh Hollister himself came calling, not 2 days after the funeral. Offered what he called a mercy price for the deed. When I refused, things started happening. Cattle scattered, fences broke, feed went missing. But you stayed. John loved this land." She secured the last bandage with practiced fingers. "I'll not dishonor that love by running." Clayton watched her move about the cabin, efficient and graceful, despite her burdens. She was younger than him by a decade at least, but her eyes held the weight of hard years. Still beautiful, though, the kind of beauty that came from strength, rather than softness. "You're healing well," she observed, washing her hands in the basin. "Few more days, you'll be strong enough to move on." The words were casual, but Clayton caught the question beneath them. She'd nursed him, fed him, kept his secrets without asking why. Now she deserved something in return. "About that," he said, carefully. "I've some business needs settling first. Men like the ones who shot me, they don't stop at one try." Sarah dried her hands, considering him. "And are you the kind of man who stops at one try, Mr. Turner?" "No, ma'am, I'm not." He met her gaze steadily. "But I am the kind who believes in paying debts." She moved to the window, looking out at her small ranch in the fading light. "I don't want charity. Good. Because I'm offering justice instead." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Finally, Sarah turned back, something like hope kindling in her eyes. "Tell me." Clayton shifted carefully, sitting straighter against the pillows. "First, I need to know everything. You remember about your husband's death, every detail, no matter how small." She pulled John's old chair closer to the bed, settling in for a long conversation. Outside, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the cabin walls in shades of gold and shadow. As Sarah spoke, Clayton listened with the patience of a man who'd built an empire one decision at a time. Each detail she shared was another piece of the puzzle, another weapon for the coming fight. He'd came to her cabin a wounded stranger, carrying nothing but secrets and borrowed time. Now, watching her relive the worst day of her life for the sake of justice, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about his ranch anymore. This was about something larger, something worth more than all the water rights in the territory. Later he would recognize this moment as the one where everything changed. But for now, he simply listened, building his strength and planning his return from the dead. The land office documents Sarah kept in her husband's old trunk told a story that made Clayton's blood boil. Sitting at her kitchen table, leg nearly healed enough to bear weight, he spread out the papers like a deck of cards. Each one revealed another piece of the Hollisters' scheme. "Look here," he said, tapping a deed transfer from 2 years back, "the Wilkinson place. Sold for 1/10 of its value after their well mysteriously went dry." Sarah leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. "That was right after John died. Mary Wilkinson had 4 children to feed. She couldn't hold out like I did. Clayton nodded, spreading out more papers. The pattern was clear as desert sunrise. First came the accidents. Wells failing, fences cut, cattle scattered. Then the visits, all sympathy and soft words, offering quick cash for quick sales. Those who refused faced escalating pressure. Some, like John Collins, met with fatal accidents. Your husband, Clayton said carefully. He was gathering evidence, wasn't he? Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she picked up another document. He knew something wasn't right, kept copies of everything. Talked about riding to the territorial capital. She paused, swallowing hard. That was the week he died. Clayton's fingers brushed against hers as he took the paper. The contact was brief, but it sent warmth through his healing body. These dates, he mused, focusing on the task, they line up with water rights claims filed by shell companies, all leading back to the Hollister Mining Company, Sarah finished. They're not just after ranch land, they're after the water. All of it. The scope of it hit Clayton like a physical blow. The Hollisters weren't just land grabbers. They were building an empire by controlling every water source in the territory. His own Spring Creek dispute was just one piece of a larger puzzle. Mining uses water by the 1,000 gallons, he explained, mind racing. With control of the watersheds, they could strangle every independent ranch and farm in 3 counties. Sarah's voice was tight with anger. That's what John discovered. That's why they killed him. Clayton stood carefully, testing his leg. The wound pulled, but held. Sarah. These papers, they're dynamite. But we need more. Recent records, proof of the shell companies. The land office in town burned last month, she reminded him. Convenient fire, according to the sheriff. But not the only copies. Clayton moved to the window, watching the sun set behind the mountains. County seat keeps duplicates. And I know people there who'd help if approached carefully. Sarah stepped closer, her reflection joining his in the darkening glass. You're not just a drifter, are you, Mr. Turner? The moment had come. Clayton turned to face her, seeing the knowledge already in her eyes. No, ma'am, I'm not. You own land, enough to make the Hollisters nervous. I did. Still do if my people have held it together in my absence. Sarah studied him, head tilted slightly. You could have told me. Needed to be sure first, about a lot of things. He met her gaze steadily. I'm sure now. She nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. So what's our next move? The word our warmed him more than it should. I need to contact my ranch quietly. Then we gather more proof, build a case strong enough that even a bought judge can't ignore it. And if that doesn't work, Clayton's smile was grim. Then we do it the hard way. But first, he gestured to the scattered papers. We need to hide these somewhere safer than that trunk. The Hollisters will come sniffing around again eventually. Sarah's answering smile held a fierce edge. Already done. These are copies. Originals are buried under the rosebush John planted for our 5th anniversary. He always said beauty makes the best hiding place. Looking at her in the fading light, Clayton couldn't help but agree. Your husband was a wise man, Mrs. Collins. Yes, she said softly. He was. And he'd want me to finish what he started. Together they gathered the documents, their hands brushing occasionally in the gathering. Darkness. Outside, the desert wind whispered of change coming. Soon, Clayton knew, he'd ride back into town like a ghost rising from the grave. But tonight, in this quiet cabin with this strong woman, he allowed himself to heal and plan and feel something. He hadn't expected to feel again, hope. Dawn found Clayton saddling Sarah's old mare, his movements careful but sure. The borrowed clothes fit well enough. John Collins had been a bigger man, but his Sunday coat suited Clayton's purpose. He needed to look anonymous, forgettable. 2 days, he promised Sarah, who stood in the doorway wrapped in her shawl, against the morning chill. I'll be back before the 3rd sunset. She handed him a carefully folded map, her fingers lingering as they touched his. Remember the back trails I marked? The Hollisters' men watch the main roads. He tucked the map inside his vest, next to his father's pocket watch, now cleaned of blood but still bearing its battle scars. Keep that Spencer carbine close, and if anyone comes, I'm just a lonely widow tending my chickens. Her smile held steel beneath its softness. Been playing that part for 3 years now. Clayton mounted, adjusting to the unfamiliar saddle. You're a lot more than that, Sarah Collins. So are you, Clayton Reed. He startled at his real name, then saw her quiet amusement. How long have you known? Since yesterday. Found an old broadsheet with your picture, back when you won that water rights case against the railroad. Her expression turned serious. Your secret's safe with me. He touched his hat brim, emotion tightening his throat. Then he turned the mare east, toward the rising sun, and the first step in his return from the dead. Tom Martinez's line cabin lay hidden in a box canyon, far from any regular patrol routes. Clayton arrived as afternoon shadows lengthened, watching from cover until he was sure his foreman was alone. The sight of Tom's stunned face made the careful approach worthwhile. Mother of God, Tom whispered, crossing himself. We thought the blood in the arroyo. That's what they were meant to think. Clayton dismounted carefully, his legs still, stiff. Martha, holding the fort, Hollister's men came sniffing around, but she played the grieving housekeeper perfect. Said you'd ridden to Sacramento on business. Tom's eyes narrowed. It was them, wasn't it, the Hollisters? Clayton nodded grimly. Part of something bigger than we thought. I need you to get messages to some people. Quietly, they spent the next hour planning, Clayton marking names on Tom's own map of the territory. Ben Hawkins, who'd lost his spread under suspicious circumstances. Judge Morrison's clerk, who had access to sealed records. Mary Wilkinson, whose children still went hungry after the forced sale of their ranch. All of them have reason to move against the Hollisters, Clayton explained, but they need to know they're not alone. Tom studied the map, understanding, dawning. You're building an army. I'm building a case, but if it comes to war... Clayton's hand brushed his healed shoulder. We'll be ready. As sunset approached, Tom pressed a stack of papers into Clayton's hands. Land office records. Martha got copies before the fire. And this, he hesitated, then added a letter. From Bill Thompson at the county seat. Came the day after we thought we lost you. Clayton read quickly, his expression hardening. The letter confirmed his worst fears. The Hollisters had judges in their pocket all the way to Sacramento. This fight would need more than legal papers to win. Keep things steady at the ranch, he instructed, mounting up. I'll contact you when it's time. Tom caught his reins. Boss, that widow who saved you, can she be trusted? Clayton thought of Sarah's fierce determination, her quiet strength, the way she'd tended his wounds while guarding her own deeper hurts. With my life, Tom, already has been. The ride back to Sarah's cabin took him past his own ranch. In the distance, he could see lights in the main house windows, smoke rising from the chimney. Martha keeping the home fires burning just as she'd promised. Soon he'd return there too, but first there was justice to be won. He found Sarah waiting up, a lamp burning in her window like a beacon. She took one look at his face and went to fetch coffee, strong and hot. They spread the new papers on her kitchen table, adding to their growing arsenal of evidence. We'll need help, she said, studying the documents. Clayton nodded, thinking of the faces behind each name on Tom's map. Help's coming. The storm's about to break, Sarah. You ready for what that means? Her hand found his in the lamplight. Been ready for 3 years, Clayton Reed. Just been waiting for the right ally. Outside, a coyote called to its mate across the dark desert. Inside, 2 wounded souls bent their heads together over papers that could change everything, planning revolution by lamplight. Over the next week, messages traveled the territory like wind-blown seeds, taking root in careful hands. Each note bore a simple code, 3 crosses drawn in the corner, a signal developed during Sarah's late husband's investigation. Those who recognized it knew help was finally coming. Mary Wilkinson's reply came first, delivered by her oldest son who'd ridden through the night. Whatever you're planning, she'd written, count us in. My children deserve to know their father didn't die in vain. Ben Hawkins sent no written response. Instead, he appeared at Sarah's back door one evening, hat in hand. Heard a ghost was gathering friends, he said quietly. Thought I'd see for myself. Clayton stood from the kitchen table, letting the lamplight fall on his face. No ghost. Ben, just a man who's seen enough. They said you were dead. Ben's weathered face broke into a fierce grin. Should have known better. Reed men don't die easy. More came as the days passed. Judge Morrison's clerk brought land office duplicates hidden in his saddlebags. 3 former deputies who'd quit rather than follow corrupt orders. A telegraph operator who'd been logging suspicious messages. Each brought another piece of evidence, another thread in the web of corruption they were mapping. Sarah's cabin became their war room, the kitchen table covered in documents arranged in careful order. They developed a system for sharing information. Coded messages passed through a network of trusted hands, each person knowing only their immediate contacts for safety. Like an underground railroad, Sarah observed one night, showing Clayton a particularly clever route using old cattle trails. Only we're smuggling truth instead of people. He studied the route she'd marked, admiring her tactical mind. Your husband taught you well. John believed in being prepared. She traced a line on the map with her finger. He used to say the best defense is knowing more than your enemy thinks you know. Clayton watched her work, seeing how naturally she'd taken to this role of resistance leader. The quiet widow had become a general, commanding an army of truth-seekers. With steady grace, their coded messages became more sophisticated. Weather talk carried hidden meanings. Clear skies meant safe passage, storm brewing warned of Hollister patrols. Cattle brands served as signatures, altered slightly to identify allies. Even quilt patterns hanging on washing lines became signals, certain combinations warning of danger or calling for meetings, but their growing network didn't go unnoticed. Hugh Hollister's men rode the territory more frequently now, asking questions in town, watching the roads. They knew something was brewing, even if they couldn't quite smell the storm. They're getting nervous, Tom reported during one of his clandestine visits. Started offering bounties for information about suspicious gatherings. Let them sweat, Clayton replied, sorting through new evidence. The more they tighten their grip, the more people slip through their fingers. Sarah added another document to their growing collection. We've got proof of 12 forced sales now, 3 suspicious, deaths and paper trails leading to their shell companies. But we still need the smoking gun, Clayton finished. Proof they can't bury or burn. Ben Hawkins cleared his throat. Might have something. My boy's been working at their mining office, keeping his eyes open. Says there's a safe in Hollister's. Private office. Special ledger he writes in every night. The room grew quiet as possibilities unfurled. Clayton's mind raced with calculations. Getting in would be suicide. Unless... Sarah's eyes lit with purpose. Unless they invited us in themselves. All eyes turned to her as she spread out. A fresh sheet of paper. The Hollisters are hosting a party next month. Some kind of celebration for their new mining contract. Every important person in the territory will be there. Clayton's pulse quickened, including the men they've bought. Exactly. Sarah's smile held Winter's edge. All their conspirators under one roof, while their guard is down. And I happen to know they're looking for extra serving staff. The plan took shape around her kitchen table as night deepened toward dawn. Each person added their piece. Guard rotations, building layouts, guest lists. By sunrise, they had something that might just work, might just be crazy enough to succeed. It's dangerous, Clayton warned them all. Anyone want to back out, now's the time. Ben Hawkins spoke for them all, his voice gruff with emotion. We've been backing out for years. Time to stand and fight. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the desert gold. Inside, a dozen people who'd lost everything to corruption and greed clasped hands in a circle, sealing their pact. The storm they'd been building was about to break. The morning Clayton Reed returned from the dead, the town of Silver Bend held its breath. He rode in on his own stallion. Tom had brought the horse under cover of darkness, wearing his best black coat and a month's worth of carefully cultivated beard. The sun at his back cast his shadow long down the dusty main street. Hugh Hollister was holding court outside the saloon when Clayton appeared. The big man's face went slack with shock, whiskey glass slipping from his fingers to shatter on the boardwalk. "Good morning, Hugh," Clayton called, his voice carrying clear down the street. "You're looking like you've seen a ghost." Faces appeared in windows. Doors creaked open. The whole town seemed to lean forward, watching the scene unfold. "Reed," Hollister's voice cracked. "They said, we heard that I was dead." Clayton dismounted smoothly, his heeled leg holding firm. "Seems the news was somewhat exaggerated." He stepped onto the boardwalk, spurs ringing against wood. "Though not for lack of trying on someone's part." Hugh's hand twitched toward his gun. His younger brother Frank materialized from the saloon, eyes wild. "Now see here, Reed, I see plenty." Clayton's voice could have frozen hell. "I see men who think they can murder their way to power, who think they can steal land from widows and orphans, who think the law doesn't apply to them. Those are dangerous accusations," Hugh growled, finding his courage in anger. "Not accusations." Clayton reached into his coat, producing a thick envelope. "Facts, documented, witnessed, and ready for the territorial judge's review." He raised his voice, addressing the growing crowd. "Anyone interested in learning how the Hollister Mining Company really operates, be at the courthouse tomorrow at noon." Frank Hollister's gun cleared leather. Before he could level it, the distinctive click of a hammer being cocked echoed from the hotel balcony. Sarah stood there, John Spencer carbine steady in her hands. "I wouldn't," she said calmly, "unless you fancy explaining another accident to the sheriff." More weapons appeared. Ben Hawkins from the general store doorway, Mary Wilkinson's sons from the livery stable, Tom Martinez, and 3 ranch hands walking casually up the street. The Hollisters found themselves at the center of a closing circle. "This is how it's going to work," Clayton continued, his tone conversational but carrying clear. "You're going to face justice, legal justice in open court, unless you'd prefer to discuss things now." His hand rested near his own holster. "I'm told I still owe you some lead." Hugh Hollister's face worked through shock, rage, and finally, calculation. "You've got nothing, Reed. Papers can burn, witnesses can disappear, and judges," he smiled coldly. "Well, judges know which side their bread's buttered on, maybe once." Clayton matched his smile, "But times change. The territorial governor's taken a personal interest in this case. Seems he doesn't appreciate corrupt officials making his jurisdiction look bad." That hit home. Hugh's smile slipped as he looked around, counting armed opponents, measuring odds. Finally, he stepped back, pulling his brother with him. "Tomorrow, then, at the courthouse." His attempt at a confident laugh fooled no one. "Hope you enjoyed disappointment, Reed. Oh, one more thing." Clayton's voice stopped them at the saloon. "You're Sarah Collins's ranch. It's under my protection now. Along with every other property you've been eyeing, any accidents, any mysterious fires, any coincidental deaths, I'll know who to hold responsible." The Hollisters vanished into the saloon. The crowd held its breath a moment longer, then exploded into conversation. Clayton felt Sarah at his shoulder before he saw her. She'd come down from the balcony while he was talking. "Well done," she murmured, "though I'm not sure I need protection." He turned to face her, admiring how the morning sun caught gold highlights in her hair. "No, you don't, but they need to know you have it anyway." Quite a performance. Her eyes sparkled with suppressed laughter. The whole back from the dead entrance. Bit theatrical, wasn't it? "Learned from the best." He offered his arm. "Buy you a coffee, Mrs. Collins? I believe we've got some planning to do before tomorrow." She took his arm, her touch sending warmth through his chest. "Lead the way, Mr. Reed." They crossed the street together, watched by dozens of eyes. Behind them, hope and whispers spread through Silver Bend like wildfire. The storm they'd gathered was about to break, and nothing would be the same after tomorrow's reckoning. The Silver Bend courthouse had never seen such a crowd. People packed the wooden benches, stood along the walls, and spilled out onto the street. Through the open windows came the murmur of those who couldn't fit inside. Passing, whispered updates. Down the line, Judge Morrison looked uncomfortable on his bench, tugging at his collar in the summer heat. His eyes kept darting to the territorial governor's representative, a sharp-faced woman named Adelaide Ward, who'd arrived that morning. By special coach, Clayton sat at the plaintiff's table, Sarah beside him, their evidence arranged in careful order. The Hollister brothers occupied the defense table, their expensive Sacramento lawyer between them. Hugh's confident smirk had begun to fade as more witnesses filled the gallery. "Court is in session," Morrison announced, his gavel crack echoing. "This is a hearing concerning allegations against the Hollister Mining Company and associated parties." Clayton rose slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, we've prepared documentation of systematic fraud, coercion, and multiple counts of murder spanning the past 5 years. The Sacramento lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! These are baseless accusations without proof." Clayton lifted a stack of papers. "These are certified copies of land transfers, showing a pattern of forced sales at fraction of value, each preceded by suspicious accidents or threats." He laid out document after document, building his case like a mason laying stones. Mary Wilkinson testified about midnight visits and mysterious fires. Ben Hawkins produced letters threatening his children. The former deputies spoke of ordered silence. But it was the telegraph operator's evidence that struck hardest. Copies of coded messages between the Hollisters and corrupt officials, arranging accidents and cover-ups. "And here," Clayton said finally, "is the proof that ties it all together." He held up a leather-bound ledger, the Hollisters' private record book, detailing every transaction, every bribe, every murder ordered, including the attempt on my life. Hugh Hollister lunged to his feet. "That's private property, stolen from my office." "Obtained," Sarah corrected smoothly, "through legal channels by concerned citizens. The governor's office has already authenticated the handwriting." Adelaide Ward nodded confirmation, her expression stern. Hugh fell back into his chair, face gray. The Sacramento lawyer tried damage control, spinning tales of misunderstandings and overzealous business practices. But with each attempt at explanation, Clayton or Sarah produced another document, another witness, another piece of damning evidence. "Your Honor," Clayton concluded, "we're not just asking for justice for ourselves. We're asking for it on behalf of every family driven from their land, every widow left destitute, every child orphaned by the Hollisters' greed." Judge Morrison squirmed, caught between old loyalties and the territorial governor's watchful eye. "These are serious charges requiring serious consideration. These are serious crimes," Adelaide Ward cut in, "requiring immediate action. The governor's office recommends immediate arrest of the accused, pending full trial in Sacramento." The Hollister's lawyer made a final attempt. "Your Honor, my clients are respected businessmen. They can provide substantial bond. Their resources are precisely why they pose a flight risk." Clayton interrupted. "Those same resources they gained through murder and theft." Morrison's gavel cracked again. "Order!" He mopped his brow, then straightened. "Given the evidence presented and the governor's office recommendation, I have no choice. Hugh and Frank Hollister will be taken into custody. Their assets frozen pending investigation. Properties obtained through proven fraud will be returned to their rightful owners or their heirs." The courthouse erupted. Hugh Hollister had to be restrained from attacking Clayton. Frank collapsed, weeping. Their lawyer began shouting about appeals, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Through it all, Clayton felt Sarah's hand slip into his. He looked down to find her smiling, tears in her eyes. "John would be proud," he said softly. "This is his victory too. It's everyone's victory." She squeezed his hand. "But we're not finished, are we?" Clayton watched as the sheriff led the Hollister brothers away. "No, There are more corrupt officials to root out, more wrongs to right. He turned to face her fully. Ready for another fight? Her answer was interrupted by well-wishers swarming around them, offering congratulations and thanks. But her eyes held his, bright with purpose and something warmer. They both knew this was just the beginning of a longer journey, one they'd travel together. Victory's sweetness lasted exactly 3 days. The warning came in lead and flame, bullets splintering Sarah's front porch posts at midnight, followed by burning arrows arcing over her roof. The message was clear. The Hollisters might be in jail, but their reach remained long. Clayton had insisted on staying at her cabin, sleeping in John's old chair. His gun cleared leather before he was fully awake, returning fire as Sarah grabbed her Spencer carbine. "Back door!" he called, covering her movement. "Get to the root cellar!" Like hell! She dropped to one knee beside him, picking off a shadow that moved too boldly against the moonlight. A cry of pain rewarded her aim. "This is my home. I'm defending it." More riders appeared, silhouetted against the night sky. The burning arrows had caught Sarah's hay barn, painting everything in flickering orange light. Clayton counted at least 8 attackers, all firing from horseback. "Hired guns," he muttered, ducking as splinters flew. "Professional work, not local muscle." A bullet struck the doorframe inches from Sarah's head. She didn't flinch, just shifted her aim and squeezed the trigger. Another rider fell. "Getting expensive for jailbirds," she observed, reloading with practiced speed. "Someone's backing them still." Clayton's response was cut short by the thunder of approaching hooves. For a moment, he feared reinforcements had arrived. Then he heard Tom Martinez's voice ring out, "Reed, we saw the fire!" Half a dozen of Clayton's ranch hands emerged from the darkness, rifles blazing. Caught between 2 forces, the attackers wheeled their horses, retreating into the night. Tom and his men gave chase, their shouts fading into the distance. "You're hit!" Sarah's voice was tight with concern. Clayton looked down to find blood seeping through his shirt sleeve, a graze he hadn't even felt in the heat of battle. Just a scratch. He touched her cheek, finding it smudged with gunpowder. "You're something else with that rifle, Mrs. Collins." "Had practice." She began bandaging his arm with a torn strip of her apron. "But this proves what we suspected. The Hollisters were just the visible head of the snake." Clayton nodded grimly. The attack was too well coordinated, too professional for jailed men to arrange. Someone with money and influence was protecting their investment in the Hollisters. Scheme. Tom returned as dawn was breaking, leading his men and 3 captured attackers. One was wounded, Sarah's handiwork, but the other 2 were merely sullen. "Found these buzzards trying to hide in Box Canyon," Tom reported. "The rest got away, but—" He held up a bullet-riddled sign, its painted warning still legible. "Drop the case or drop dead." Clayton studied their prisoners. "Who hired you?" Silence. He tried again. "The Hollisters are finished. No point dying for dead men." The wounded man stirred. "Prove it. Prove they're finished." "Happy to." Sarah returned from the cabin with a newspaper. "This just came by morning stage." "Read it yourself." The man squinted at the headlines. "Hollister brothers face capital charges. Governor orders special prosecutor." His face fell. "Sacramento," he muttered to his companions. "It's gone federal." The other 2 shifted uneasily. Finally, the older one spoke. "We was hired through a fence in San Francisco, never met the real boss, but the money came from back east, some mining consortium." Clayton and Sarah exchanged looks. Eastern mining interests explained a lot. The scale of corruption, the seemingly endless resources. This fight was bigger than they'd imagined. "Get them to town," Clayton told Tom. "Keep them alive, they're evidence now." As his men rode off with the prisoners, Clayton surveyed the damage. The hay barn was a loss, but the cabin had survived with only minor wounds. Like its owner, he thought, watching Sarah organize volunteers who'd arrived to help clean up. "They'll try again," she said when the immediate crisis had passed. "Maybe not here, maybe not with guns, but they'll try." Clayton wrapped his good arm around her shoulders, feeling her lean into him despite her. Fierce independence. Let them. We've got something they don't. Oh, she looked up at him, a smile playing at her lips despite the night's violence. What's that? Nothing left to lose. He touched the singed corner of John's old quilt, rescued from the porch. And everything to fight for. The sun rose fully, painting the desert gold. They had work to do, repairs to make, allies to warn, plans to adjust. But for a moment, they simply stood together, watching the new day dawn. The fight wasn't over, but they'd proven they could win. Sometimes that was enough. The morning after the attack, Clayton spread a fresh partnership agreement across Sarah's kitchen table. The official document looked oddly formal among the breakfast dishes and coffee cups, its legal language a stark contrast to the bullet holes in the walls behind them. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said, studying the terms. "My land's not worth the trouble it's bringing you. This isn't charity." Clayton poured more coffee, watching her face. "Your water rights complement mine perfectly. Combined, our lands could support twice the cattle, and you've proven yourself more than capable of running operations." She raised an eyebrow. "That what I am? An operational asset? You know better." His voice softened. "You're the strongest person I've met in 30 years of ranching. This partnership's about more than land." Sarah traced the edge of the document, her finger pausing at the space for her signature. "John always said I was too independent for my own good. Told me I'd have to learn to trust someone again someday." "Smart man, you're John." "Yes." She looked up, meeting Clayton's eyes. "He also said when that day came, I'd know it in my bones." A small smile touched her lips. "Think he'd approve of a ghostly business partner? I'm flesh and blood enough." Clayton shifted his wounded arm, wincing. "Got the holes to prove it." Their quiet laughter was interrupted by Tom Martinez arriving with the morning report. The captured gunman had revealed more under the sheriff's questioning. Names of contacts, details of payment arrangements, a trail leading toward San Francisco. "Governor's office is sending investigators," Tom reported. "But there's something else. Ben Hawkins rode in at dawn. Says there's movement at the mining company. Men loading wagons at night, carrying out papers. Destroying evidence," Sarah concluded. "What's left of it, anyway?" Clayton nodded grimly. "Or moving it. Either way, we need to know what they're trying to hide." He studied the partnership agreement still waiting on the table. "Sure you want in on this? It's only going to get more complicated." Sarah picked up the pen, her movement decisive. "Already in, Mr. Reed. Might as well make it official." They signed together, witnesses by Tom and Martha, who'd arrived with fresh biscuits and worried eyes. The document's official language couldn't capture what really passed between them in that moment. An alliance forged in gunfire and trust, sealed with ink, but bound by something deeper. "First order of business," Sarah said, all practical. "Efficiency now. We need eyes on those wagons. I know every back trail between here and San Francisco. Second order," Clayton added, "is consolidating our defenses. That means moving you to the main house until we secure things here." He expected argument, but Sarah surprised him. "Temporary arrangement," she qualified. "And I'll need space for my papers, John's research, the evidence we're still collecting. West Wing's empty. Could be your office." "Our office," she corrected. "Partners, remember?" The word warmed him more than it should have. They spent the rest of the morning planning, heads bent together over maps and documents. Martha brought more coffee and smiled knowingly at Tom, who suddenly found the view from the window fascinating. By afternoon, the first wagons were rolling. Sarah's furniture and John's old trunk, Clayton's evidence files, and Sarah's newly organized office materials. But it was the small things that caught at Clayton's heart. Her mother's china carefully wrapped, John's books packed with reverence, the bullet-scarred quilt folded with care. "Feels strange," Sarah admitted, watching the wagons pull away, "living under someone else's roof again." "Our roof," Clayton corrected gently, "and only until we rebuild here." She turned to him, expression serious. "You mean that? The rebuilding?" "Every word. Partnership means equal say in everything." He gestured at the burned barn, the damaged cabin. "We'll make it stronger than before. Sarah's hand found his, squeezing briefly. Partners in all things? The question held more than business, and they both knew it. Clayton lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her fingers with old-fashioned courtesy. In all things, Mrs. Collins, however long it takes. They rode to the main house together as sunset painted the desert gold. Behind them, Sarah's cabin stood wounded but unbowed, like their own hearts. Ahead lay more battles, more challenges, more chances to prove their alliance strong. But for now they had trust, purpose, and each other. Sometimes Clayton thought, watching Sarah's profile in the fading light, that was everything. The ledger appeared on their doorstep 3 weeks after Sarah moved to the main house. No note, no explanation. Just a leather-bound book wrapped in oilcloth, delivered by a ranch hand who found it tied to his saddle horn after a night patrol. Could be a trap, Tom warned, studying the package on Clayton's desk. Awful convenient. And timing. Sarah was already pulling on gloves, her eyes bright with purpose. Only one way to find out. The book's cover bore the embossed seal of the Eastern Mining Consortium. Inside, page after page of careful accounting told the story they'd been seeking, proof of the conspiracy reaching all the way to Boston and New York boardrooms. Look at these names. Clayton's finger traced down a column of signatures. Senators, bank presidents, railroad men, all with shares in the water rights scheme. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. And all profiting from stolen land and murdered ranchers. She turned another page, then stopped suddenly. Clayton, this entry... He leaned closer, reading where she pointed. The date was 3 years ago, the week John Collins died. The entry was brief but damning. Collins elimination. Authorized payment to H.H., $500. H.H., Clayton's voice was soft. Hugh Hollister. Sarah's hands didn't shake, but her knuckles were white against the leather cover. $500. That's what John's life was worth to them. Clayton covered her hand with his. No, that's what they paid to try to stop him. But they failed. His work, his evidence, it all led to this moment, to justice. She took a deep breath, straightening. You're right, and there's more here. Look, details of their entire operation. Water rights purchases, shell companies, bribed officials, everything we needed but couldn't prove. They worked through the night, copying entries, cross-referencing names, building an ironclad case. Martha brought coffee and concerned glances, but didn't suggest they rest. She knew that look in their eyes, the one that meant justice, was finally within reach. Dawn found them still at it, surrounded by papers and purpose. Tom arrived with more news. The ranch hand who'd found the ledger remembered something. A figure on horseback following at a distance. A woman, he thought, though he couldn't be sure. Adelaide Ward. Clayton wondered, thinking of the governor's sharp-eyed representative. Sarah shook her head. Mary Wilkinson mentioned her oldest girl's been working as a maid for one of the mining company directors. Said the girl had access to the private offices during cleaning. Brave girl, Clayton whistled softly, taking that kind of risk. Desperate girl, Sarah corrected. Like all of us. Sometimes that's stronger than fear. The ledger's final pages held something else. Notes about urgent telegrams, contingency plans, a growing panic among the conspirators. The Hollisters' arrest had shaken their confidence. Now they were liquidating assets, preparing to abandon their Western ventures. They're running. Clayton's satisfaction was fierce. All that power, all that money, and they're running scared from the truth. Sarah was already drafting telegrams, her pen flying across paper. Governor's office. First, then the federal marshal in Sacramento. That special prosecutor they assigned to the Hollisters will want this immediately. Clayton watched her work, admiring her efficiency, her determination, her everything. We're really going to win this. She paused, looking up at him with a smile that made his heart skip. Did you ever doubt it? Not since the day you found me in that arroyo. Their eyes held, something electric passing between them. But there was work to do first. Justice to secure. The rest The rest could wait. By noon, copies of the ledger's key pages were racing toward Sacramento via trusted couriers. By sunset, telegrams were flying between the territorial capital and Washington. And by moonrise, Sarah and Clayton stood on the main house's porch, watching stars emerge over their combined lands. "Tomorrow will bring chaos," she said softly. "Once this evidence hits the newspapers, let it come." Clayton's arm slipped around her shoulders, natural as breathing. "We've got truth on our side now, documented, undeniable truth." She leaned into him, just slightly, and each other, he agreed, his heart full of something that felt like dawn breaking. Always that. Behind them, the house glowed warm with lamplight and purpose. Before them stretched the desert, vast and full of possibility. And between them, in that quiet moment, grew the certainty that they could face whatever tomorrow brought. Together. Dawn painted the study walls gold as Clayton and Sarah reviewed their battle plans one final time. The ledger sat between them, its secrets now protected by multiple copies scattered across 3 states. Tomorrow, the special prosecutor would present their evidence to a federal grand jury in Sacramento. "Signal riders in place?" Sarah asked, marking positions on their well-worn map. 3 men at each relay point. Clayton touched the marked locations. "Any trouble, we'll know within the hour." Tom Martinez entered, his expression tight. Wire from Ben Hawkins. Mining companies bringing in more guns. 20 men at least coming in from California. "Expected that." Clayton nodded grimly. "They'll try to destroy the evidence before it reaches Sacramento. Or us with it." Sarah studied the map, mind working. "They'll watch the main roads, but there's an old Apache trail through Devil's Canyon. Narrow for wagons, but horses could make it. Known to locals? Only to those who've lost cattle there." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "John showed me once, said it might prove useful someday." Clayton squeezed her shoulder gently. "Smart man, your John." "Yes." She covered his. "And with hers, he'd approve of how we're using his knowledge." Martha appeared with coffee and news. The governor's men had arrived in town, preparing for tomorrow's evidence transfer. With them came Adelaide Ward, bringing federal marshals and a steel-hard determination to see justice done. "Time to set the last pieces," Clayton said, rising. "Tom, get word to our people. Anyone not directly involved should clear out tonight. No need for extra targets." Sarah was already writing notes, her pen scratching quick and sure. "Mary Wilkinson's oldest boy can take the South Relay. He's young, but he rides like the devil. And twice as smart," Clayton agreed. "Ben's men will cover the north approach. That leaves the canyon route to me." Sarah's tone brooked no argument. "I know it best, and they won't expect a woman." Clayton started to object, then saw the look in her eyes, the same look she'd worn facing down gunmen on her porch. "Partner's prerogative?" "Exactly." She sealed the last note with a firm press. "Besides, you'll be too busy playing target in town." He couldn't argue with the logic. The conspirators would expect the evidence to move with him, the obvious protector, the public face of their resistance, while their hired guns watched. Him, Sarah would slip through Devil's Canyon with the real ledger, making for Sacramento under cover of darkness. The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. Horses were chosen for speed and sure-footedness, weapons cleaned, loaded, distributed to trusted hands. Maps memorized, then burned. Nothing could be left to chance or enemy discovery. As sunset approached, Clayton found Sarah in John's old study, now their shared office. She stood at the window, watching shadows lengthen across the land they'd fought so hard to protect. "Having doubts?" he asked softly. "Not about tomorrow." She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "Just thinking about changes. How life takes turns you never expect. Regrets?" "No." Her smile warmed him like morning sun. "Just grateful. For John's wisdom that led us here. For your strength that helped us fight. For—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "for second chances at happiness." Clayton's heart thundered like hoofbeats. He stepped closer, drawn by something stronger than gravity. "Sarah, I know." She touched his cheek gently. "After tomorrow, after justice is done, we'll have time then." He caught her hand, pressed his lips to her palm. "Promise me you'll be careful. Devil's Canyon's no place to ride at night, Apache. Trail or not, promise me the same. Those hired guns won't care about justice or right." "I promise." He held her gaze. "I've got too much to live for now." Their moment was interrupted by Tom, bringing final reports. Plans to review, positions to check, 1,000 details demanding attention. The sun set in fire, promising weather fair for tomorrow's ride. Later, watching Sarah check her saddle one last time, Clayton felt certainty settle in his bones. Whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it as they'd faced everything, together, even when apart. Partners in all things, just as they'd promised. The night deepened toward midnight, stars wheeling overhead. Soon they'd separate, each to their task, carrying hope and determination into darkness. But for now, they shared one last cup of coffee, letting silence say what words couldn't yet speak. Clayton Reed rode into Silver Bend at high noon, the summer sun beating down like judgment. The street had emptied, townspeople retreating behind. Locked doors and shuttered windows. Only dust devils danced in the spaces between buildings, spinning tales of what was to come. He made a show of checking his saddlebags, letting the watching eyes see his careful handling of a leather portfolio. Empty, of course. The real ledger was already miles away, cradled in Sarah's saddlebags as she traced John's hidden trail through Devil's Canyon. But their enemies wouldn't know that for hours yet. Adelaide Ward met him on the courthouse steps, her formal Eastern dress incongruous in the desert heat. "Right on time, Mr. Reed. Though our friends appear to be running late. They'll come." Clayton dismounted slowly, making himself a target. Too much at stake for them not to. The first shot came from the saloon roof, a warning deliberately wide. Clayton didn't flinch, just turned to face the shooter. "That the best you can do, boys? Shooting at an unarmed man in broad daylight?" "Drop the saddlebags, Reed." The voice was unfamiliar, one of the California guns. Nobody needs to die today. Nobody needed to die 3 years ago either. Clayton's voice carried clear down the street. "But that didn't stop you killing John Collins, or trying to kill me." Movement caught his eye, men emerging from shadows, taking positions. He counted 12, maybe more. Professional killers, not local muscle. The mining consortium was spending heavy to protect their secrets. "Last chance." Another gunman appeared. On the hotel balcony, rifle aimed steady. "Walk away. Take your evidence to Sacramento if you want. It'll be your word against a lot of important men." Clayton smiled grimly. "Already done. Copies of everything are in the governor's hands. Federal marshals are riding as we speak." That stirred them. Whispers passed between positions, plans adjusting. Clayton used their distraction to edge closer to the courthouse doors, where Tom and Ben waited with loaded rifles. A new voice spoke, one Clayton recognized. Judge Morrison stepped into the street, sweating in his black coat. "Don't be a fool, Reed. You know how this works. Money talks. Your evidence will disappear. Witnesses will go silent. Why die for nothing?" "Nothing?" Clayton's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Tell that to the widows you helped create, the families you drove from their land. Tell Sarah Collins her husband died for nothing." The judge's face hardened. "Sentiment's expensive, Reed, but everyone has a price. Name yours." "Already got what I want." Clayton nodded toward the horizon. "Time was all we needed. While you're here threatening me, the real evidence is halfway to Sacramento." Realization hit like a thunderclap. Guns swung up, orders shouted. The judge's face went purple. "The woman! Find her! 5,000 to the man who brings me that." "Ledger!" Horses exploded from the livery stable, riders spurring hard toward the canyon trails. But Clayton knew they were already too late. Sarah had hours of lead time, and John's secret path would swallow her like a ghost. "Just you and me now, Judge." Clayton's hand rested near his holster. Want to explain to these fine citizens why you're so anxious about that ledger? About what it says regarding certain judicial decisions? Morrison went for his gun, clumsy, desperate. Clayton's draw was smooth as silk, earned through 30 years of hard living. The judge's pistol had barely cleared leather when Clayton's first shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him down. The street erupted. Gunfire blazed from every angle as the hired killers opened up. Clayton dove for cover behind a water trough, feeling splinters fly. Tom and Ben returned fire from the courthouse doors, covering his movement. "It's over, Morrison," Clayton called above the chaos. "Your conspirators are abandoning you, running back to their Boston clubs and New York mansions. You really want to die for them." More shots answered him, but he heard the fear in their rhythm, the uncertainty. These were hired guns, not true. Believers, with their paymasters running scared and the law closing in, their resolve was cracking. The shooting slowed, then stopped. In the ringing silence, Clayton heard horses racing away, the California gunman choosing survival over a lost cause. Only Morrison remained, slumped against a hitching post, blood darkening his fine coat. "You've ruined everything," the judge gasped as Clayton approached. "Years of building, all the power we'd accumulated. Power built on blood." Clayton kicked Morrison's gun away. "On theft and murder and corruption. That kind of power was always going to fall." Adelaide Ward emerged from the courthouse, federal marshals at her shoulder. "Judge Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and accessory to multiple murders. I suggest you start naming names. Your friends in Boston won't be protecting you anymore." As they led Morrison away, Tom brought news from there. Outriders. Sarah had been spotted safe, crossing the county line with her precious cargo. By nightfall, she'd be in Sacramento, delivering final justice to the men who'd thought themselves above the law. The townspeople emerged slowly, blinking in the afternoon sun. They found Clayton Reed standing in the bullet-pocked street, his father's silver watch marking the moment victory turned to history. Someone started clapping, then another, until the sound rolled like thunder, but Clayton hardly heard them. His eyes were on the horizon, searching the trail that led to Sacramento, to Sarah, to a future they'd fought for and won together. "Quite a show," Adelaide Ward said, joining him, "though I suspect the real victory's riding hard across the desert." Clayton smiled, touching the brim of his hat. "Ma'am, you don't know the half of it." He mounted up, turning his horse toward home. There was work to do, wounded to tend, damages to repair, order to restore. But his heart rode with Sarah, carrying truth toward justice, writing the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The sun westered toward evening, painting the desert gold. Somewhere out there, a widow rode her husband's secret trail, carrying hope and vengeance and future all at once. And when she returned, Clayton knew they'd build something new together, something founded on justice and trust and love. But that was tomorrow's story. For now, he rode toward home, victory settling like sunset across the land they'd fought to save. The news reached Clayton 3 days after the shooting. Sarah's telegram was characteristically brief. Evidence delivered. Indictments issued. Coming home. SC. He read the words a dozen times, letting relief wash through him. She was safe. She'd succeeded. And she was coming home. Not to her. Rebuilt cabin, but to the main house, to him. The aftermath of the street battle kept him busy while he waited. Town council meetings, discussions with the governor's representatives, endless depositions about the conspiracy. The Hollisters' mining empire was being dismantled piece by piece, their stolen lands returned to rightful owners. Found this in Morrison's office, Tom reported, delivering a fresh deed to Clayton's desk. The original transfer for the Collins place, proof they forged John's signature. Clayton added it to their growing collection of evidence. The story emerging from Sacramento grew darker by the day. Senators resigned in disgrace. Bank presidents fled the country. Railroad magnates found themselves facing federal investigations. Like pulling a rotten tooth, Ben Hawkins observed, watching another mining company wagon being unloaded. Hurts like hell, but needs doing. Mary Wilkinson arrived with her children, tears in her eyes. The governor's office had confirmed her claim. Her land would be returned, with compensation for lost income. Her oldest daughter stood especially proud, knowing her midnight theft of the ledger had helped bring justice. "Don't know how to—" "And thank you," Mary began, but Clayton stopped her. "Thanks, Sarah Collins," he said softly. "She kept faith when the rest of us nearly lost it. And thank your girl here. Bravest thing I've ever seen, stealing that ledger." The girl blushed, but her smile could have lit the town. More families came as the week progressed, each with similar stories. Land restored, dignity regained, hope rekindled. Clayton helped where he could, but his eyes kept straying to the road from Sacramento. He was in the study when he heard hoofbeats in the yard. Tom's whoop of greeting told him all he needed to know. By the time he reached the porch, Sarah was dismounting, trail dust coating her clothes, but victory shining in her eyes. "You're late," he said, drinking in the sight of her. "Had to make sure it stuck." She handed her reins to Tom. 27 indictments. Federal prosecutors say it's just the beginning." They stood looking at each other, so much to say that words seemed inadequate. Finally, Clayton held out his hand. "Welcome home, partner." She took it, let him draw her close. "Partner in all things?" "All things," he promised, and kissed her there on the porch, not caring who saw. Martha's celebratory dinner that night drew crowds from across the territory. Ranchers and farmers, townspeople and traders all came to hear the story, to share in the triumph of justice over greed. To John Collins, Clayton toasted, raising his glass. "Who started this fight?" "To Sarah Collins," Ben Hawkins added. "Who finished it?" Sarah's eyes shone with tears and triumph. "To all of us," she corrected. "Every person who refused to bow to corruption, every family that kept faith, every friend who stood with us." Later, in the quiet of their shared study, she showed him the federal writs, official documents returning stolen lands, ordering compensation, guaranteeing water rights to their rightful owners. Among them lay a new deed, joining their properties legally, as they'd already been joined in purpose. "Quite a legacy," Clayton observed, watching her organize the papers with careful hands. "Just the beginning." She turned to him, moonlight, silvering her hair. "These lands, this partnership, we've got a chance to build something different, something better. Together," he agreed, drawing her close. "Together," she echoed, fitting perfectly against him. Outside, the desert night wrapped their home in star-studded silence. Inside, two people who'd found each other through loss and justice held on to their hard-won peace, knowing the real work of building the future was just beginning. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight was for victory, for healing, for love born in struggle and tempered by shared purpose. Tonight was for remembering the cost of justice and celebrating its triumph. Sarah's head rested on Clayton's shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. "Think John would approve? Of justice done, of his work completed, of you finding happiness again?" Clayton pressed a kiss to her hair. "Yes to all of it, love. Yes to everything." The wedding took place at sunset, exactly 1 year after Sarah found Clayton bleeding in the arroyo. They kept it simple. Just close friends and family gathered in the garden she'd planted behind the main house. Martha had woven desert wildflowers into Sarah's hair, and Clayton wore his father's watch, its bullet scars now part of their shared history. Their rings were special, gold melted down from both families' heirlooms, forged into bands that told their story. Clayton's mother's wedding ring, Sarah's grandmother's brooch, and a gold nugget John Collins had panned from the creek. The metal carried memories of all that had brought them to this moment. "Never thought I'd be doing this again," Sarah whispered as they danced under the stars. "Never thought I'd want to." Clayton held her closer, feeling the rightness of her. In his arms, "Some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for." The celebration drew people from across the territory. Mary Wilkinson's children scattered flower petals, while Ben Hawkins's wife played the piano they'd hauled out to the garden. Tom Martinez gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at once, speaking of justice and love and second chances. But it was Adelaide Ward's wedding gift that touched them deepest. Official pardons for the young ranch hands who'd helped Sarah steal the ledger, along with a letter from the governor himself praising their courage. "Seems we started something bigger than ourselves," Sarah observed, reading the governor's words about corruption exposed and faith in justice restored. "You started it," Clayton corrected gently. "That day you chose to help a stranger instead of looking the other way." Their honeymoon was brief, just 3 days at a hot springs resort near the territorial capital. There was too much work waiting, too many plans to implement. Their combined lands needed attention, and they'd promised help to other families, rebuilding after the Hollisters' fall. But those 3 days were precious, filled with quiet conversations and shared dreams. They planned improvements to the ranch, discussed breeding programs for their expanded herd, and sketched ideas for a school to serve the scattered ranching families. "Think bigger," Sarah urged one evening, laying out her vision. "We could make this a true community, not just scattered holdings, a place where people help each other, stand together against whatever comes." Clayton watched her in the lamplight, amazed as always by her strength and insight. "Like you stood for me, like we stood for each other." She touched his cheek softly. "And we'll keep standing." Returning home, they found Tom and Martha had prepared a surprise. Sarah's office moved to the study next to Clayton's, the rooms connected by a new door. Their shared workspace symbolized everything their partnership had become, personal and professional, intertwined. The ledgers on their desks now tracked cattle counts and water rights, breeding records and grazing rotations. But they kept one shelf for the old documents. Evidence of corruption, proof of justice served, reminders of the battle that had brought them together. John's photograph still held its place of honor on Sarah's desk. But now it shared space with new images. Her wedding picture with Clayton, group photos of their growing ranch family, snapshots of celebrations and everyday moments. "He'd be proud," Clayton said one evening, finding her looking at the old photo, "of everything you've built." "Everything we've built," she corrected, leaning back against him. "And we'll keep building." Their days fell into comfortable rhythm. Dawn rides to check the herds, meetings with neighboring ranchers, shared meals and quiet evenings. They worked as one, each complementing the other's strengths, their partnership a model for the community they were creating. The garden Sarah had planted flourished, desert wildflowers mixing with cultivated blooms. Like their love, it combined the wild and the tender, the sturdy and the sweet. Clayton often found her there at sunset, touching the petals of John's roses, her face peaceful. "Regrets?" he asked once, holding her from behind. "Not one," she answered firmly. "The past is honored, but the future—" She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. "The future is ours to shape." As if to prove her words, new life stirred beneath her heart, their first child growing strong, another beginning in a season of fresh starts. They would name him John if it was a boy, or Rose if it was a girl. Either way, the child would grow up knowing all their stories, of justice and courage, of love lost and found, of two people who found each other in darkness and built something beautiful in the light. 1 year later, Clayton stood in his study, watching Sarah rock their infant daughter in John's old chair. Little Rose Reed had her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength, a perfect blend of the past and future they'd built together. The family portrait on the wall captured everything they'd become. Clayton and Sarah seated together, Rose cradled between them, their extended ranch family gathered around. Tom Martinez stood proud as an uncle, Martha beamed like a grandmother, and the faces of friends and allies completed the picture. Even John's memory had its place, his photograph. Visible on the desk behind them, Governor's letter came. Sarah said, nodding toward Clayton's desk. "They've finished dismantling the last of the mining consortium's holdings. Every piece of stolen land returned, every victim compensated." "Good." Clayton moved to join them, touching Rose's downy head. "Though I'd say we found something more valuable than justice." Sarah's smile warmed him like desert sunrise. A family, a future, a legacy worth leaving. Outside their window, the combined ranch flourished. Green pastures stretched toward distant mountains, cattle grazed on regulated ranges, and clear streams ran their appointed courses. But more importantly, a community had grown, families supporting each other, children learning in the new schoolhouse, neighbors standing together against whatever challenges came. The story of their fight for justice had spread beyond the territory, inspiring others to stand against corruption. Adelaide Ward wrote occasionally, telling of similar battles won in other places, other territories. The ripples of their victory continued to spread. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Sarah asked, reading his expression. "Thinking about circles." Clayton touched his father's watch, then the gold band on his finger. "How ending up in that arroyo led me to you. How your kindness to a stranger brought down an empire of corruption. How loss can lead to finding something greater. And how love can heal even the deepest wounds." She reached for his hand. "That, most of all." He squeezed her fingers. Gently, Rose stirred in her mother's arms, reaching for her father with complete trust. Clayton lifted her, marveling at how such a tiny being could contain so much hope for the future. The sun westered toward evening, painting their world in shades of gold and promise. Soon they would join their extended family for dinner, sharing food and stories and plans for tomorrow. Their legacy would live on through Rose, through the community they'd built, through the example they'd set of standing together against injustice. But for now, they simply held each other in the quiet of their study, watching sunset paint the desert in familiar glory. Everything that mattered was right here, love and justice, past and future, all the circles closing into one perfect moment of peace. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Sarah asked softly. Clayton kissed her, then their daughter, his heart full of gratitude for every step of the path that had led him here. "With you, always."